Hey, what's up, Morpheus? Welcome back to the Commute, and in this video we're going to be talking about 2 tricks that I'm following to become a better lover. And these 2 tricks will act like a framework in your own development environment. Try to experiment with them and let's see how these will give you some new results. They'll help you become a better developer. Let's get started with the number 1 trick. The 1 trick that I want you to know is called the following the basics. Let me quickly write it down. Following the basics. Now, what do I mean by following the basics? Basics are the key. Without understanding any of the basics, for example, Kotlin in Android, there is nothing possible, right? You'll eventually fail in as an Android developer. That's why it's essential to have some kind of understanding with Kotlin, and have not even some kind, have a good understanding with Kotlin. Now, let me give you an example. What happens is most people do not learn basics. They just get started with Android 11, start making apps without understanding Kotlin first, without exploring Kotlin as such. They maybe follow some of the tutorials, just watch them, binge watch these particular tutorials, never code in Kotlin, and just get started with Android 11. Buy some kind of Udemy course or somewhere and just get started. Now, that's a tragedy waiting to happen. Why is such a case? Because Kotlin basics are very, very important. Now, why do I say that? Now, I've been working in Geeks for Geeks, and not for a long time, but of course I've joined Geeks for Geeks and I've seen their code base versus compared to the previous company that I was working on, and it was a service-based company and they were making smaller apps for different companies, and the difference in the code base is huge. Why is such a case? Because the basics of Kotlin in the Geeks for Geeks code base is amazing. They're not available in these service-based companies. Why is such a case? Because most of the developers in these particular companies do not have the basics, the foundations. Now, what do I mean by foundation as such? Let me give you an example. Like, for example, type erasure in generics, or maybe invariants, covariants. What's the difference between these two? What is variance at all? How are generics being used? These are the things that I learned along the way, because I did not even have the basics down, but I had to do it so that I can crack these big companies, understand their code bases. Now, mostly what happens is, even if you were able to clear an interview, let's just take an example. Even if you were able to clear an interview, for example, Geeks for Geeks or maybe Deloitte, right? These big companies, somehow the interviewer doesn't realize that your Kotlin isn't that great. You do not understand basics like refined keyword, inline keyword. Why is it even used? Have you ever used it? What are extension functions? What are local functions? Have you ever used them? If you do not have those basics down, what happens is, when you try to see the big code base, the 2 million, 3 million downloads app code base, you won't understand even the half of that. Why is such a case? Because they'll be using everything inside of basics of Kotlin to make the code base much more efficient. If you do not have that kind of understanding, everything falls apart, and eventually you will not be able to contribute to that code base because your basics are too bad. You won't be able to understand what are the repercussions of your own code, and are there any particular new things, some of the basics, some of the keys that you can add to make the code base much more efficient. This can only happen when you understand Kotlin basics. If you're a Flutter developer or any developer, backend developer, why are you watching this, by the way? If you're a backend developer, but yeah, whatever. A backend developer, Flutter, whoever you are, any kind of developer, understand the basics of your language. For example, let's take Android. Android has the basics in Jetpack, then Jetpack has the basics in Kotlin. Understand Kotlin, understand Jetpack, then go to Android apps, then learn about maybe system design, make your own coil library, then learn about embedded system. This is how the flow of learning should go. If you do not understand that will be, really difficult in the longer run. So understand these 2 things, understand the basics. These are very important. Carry this framework with you and try to make it a habit to make and to understand. Just explore daily something very basic. For example, try to explore generics today. Another day you try to explore invariants, how to particularly use it your first time. So that's how you become a better developer. That's what I'm doing to become a better developer. Now, the second point that I have is that I am too impatient. Now, this is a flaw that I have with me, that I am actually too impatient. I'm too impatient. Let me quickly write it down and let me explain it to you guys. Now, what do you mean by impatience as such? What happens is, for example, there's a new client requirement and we need to add a feature into the app. What happens is, when you add a new feature into the app, it might cause some kind of disturbance in the previous features that are already added into the app. The legacy code of the app might get disturbed. So if you're too impatient about it, the repercussions of your current code that you're writing, you won't be able to map it inside of your head, because it's very difficult to, draw a map of how this particular code base is connecting to everything. The only thing that I can do is understand features. What's the client requirement? Okay, this is the particular feature that is the requirement of the client. How does this particular feature relates to other features? How many relations this particular feature has? Draw it inside of your notebook, and carry a notebook something like this. Like, carry this particular notebook like with yourselves, and have this particular notebook with you. Try to understand how these features are correlating with each other. Then if you have a map of these two things, try to break them down into smaller key components and then start to code. I'm being too impatient. I usually am too impatient. I look at a particular feature, okay, let's get started. I'm not looking at how my code is having a repercussion in the whole code base. It might, crash the whole app if I do not understand how this particular code base is relating to others. I cannot draw it inside of my head because it's too big, right? In a 2 million, 3 million, 5 million downloads app, the code base is way bigger. The easiest thing that you can do is take smaller steps. Try to break it down inside of your notebook. Try to break it down to smaller steps. Understand how features correlate with each other and try to act patiently. These are the 2 tricks that I am actually following, trying to develop a habit around them, and they are helping me out in the longer run. If you have anything to add, you can add in the comments down below, and hopefully you follow these 2 tricks to become a better developer. This is it for now. Bye bye.